let's briefly talk about our product. Now, we have several different areas of coverage. I'm going to go over them each separately and differently. But before I do, let's talk about who's covered. The member's covered, of course. The member's spouse. Any never married dependent children under the age of 21 living at home. Also, dependent children under the age of 18 from whom the member is a legal guardian of. Full-time college students up to the age of 23, never married, and also dependent children. And then physically and mentally challenged children, regardless of age, living at home, all under this one membership. So that's integrity on Prepaid Legal's part. Because if you add a teenage driver to your auto insurance policy, what happens? It goes up. I have a teenage driver right now. Listen, it costs us more for his car insurance than almost my wife and I combined. But with Prepaid Legal, it could be 8 children all under this one membership if they're covered for the same monthly fee. So the first area of coverage is preventive legal services. All this means is that you're going to be proactive. You pick up the phone, call your lawyers, and simply ask them questions. You have phone consultation for an unlimited number of matters. Now, you're probably proactive in things that you do anyway. You know, I'm proactive. I have auto insurance, not because I hope to get in a car accident, but I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I have my homeowner's protection, and I have to prepay for that annually. But in order for me to use that, my house has to burn down, someone has to burglarize me, all positive things. So I really don't want to use my auto insurance. I really don't want to use my homeowner's insurance. I'm married with 4 children. I don't want to use my life insurance because you know what has to happen. And so my point is, here's something I couldn't wait to use. It's a now benefit, a life events legal plan. Things just happen every single day. So pick up the phone, call your lawyer. Look, I was driving my vehicle. I bought a brand new truck and I made a U-turn and my steering wheel stuck in mid U-turn, which is scary, by the way. So I pressed a little OnStar button that came with it and roadside assistance came and towed my truck back to the dealership. But the dealership didn't do what I thought they should do. So I called Prepaid Legal. Prepaid Legal said, where'd you buy the truck? And I told them because they said every state or province has a different limit law. They said, what's the make and model? I said, what's a Cadillac Escalade? They said, because every make and model in a particular state has a different limit law. They said, what's the issue? I said, it's a steering issue. They said, every issue on a particular make and model in a particular state or province has a different limit law. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Remember, it took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. I didn't go to law school. But the lawyers called me back the second day. They said, Mr. Self, we found out if they keep your truck for 3 days on the same steering issue, they got to give you a brand new truck that day. Do you know how many folks would have swept that under the rug? Because they would have never called a lawyer. To call a lawyer may cost more than the steering problem itself. So it just makes sense. Now, I must tell you, I called the dealership back on that day because I was so anxious. And I said, listen, I just got off the phone with my counsel. You know, I was bad, right? You have to be special when you have a lawyer. I said, if they told me, if you don't give me my truck back in one more day, you got to give me a brand new truck off your showroom floor. I added showroom floor to it and everything. But you know what they told me, right? Oh, sir, your truck will be ready this evening. I'm like, no, one more day. I would have a brand new truck. So be patient with your newfound information. You know, I never had anything in my life, so I didn't know how to act with this newfound power. So make sure that you call your lawyers and simply ask them questions. They'll also write letters and make phone calls on your behalf. If they deem that necessary, they're going to make that happen for you. And of course, an attorney writing a letter means a lot more than you and I writing that same letter. I never forget I had this creditor harassing me over $92.20 for a product I never received at the house. And I said, look, we don't even own the product. And they said, well, listen, if you don't send the $92.20, we're going to send your name to a collection agency. And look, it wasn't $92. It was the principle of the matter. So I called Prepaid Legal. They wrote a letter to that company, sent me a copy of it, had all this legal jargon in it, the attorney's name going up and down the actual form, the letter. And at the last paragraph, I never forget, it said, you must cease and desist all contact with our client pursuant to the Fair Debt Collections Practice Act. Doesn't that sound good? I mean, the letter scared me. Also, myself a check for $92, but we never heard from that company again. But it was the power of an attorney writing that letter versus Darnell writing that same letter. They also review your contracts and documents for you, up to 10 pages each. They say the bold print giveth and the fine print taketh away. So before you sign anything, have your attorneys take a look at it. It just makes sense. They'll also prepare a last will and testament for you. Listen, the number one reason why most folks don't have a last will and testament, it's not that they don't need one. All of us will need one at some point, right? Death doesn't have an age attached to it, but it's the financial reason. We know it costs hundreds, if not thousands in some cases, to have a lawyer draw up a will tailored to fit your needs. Prepaid Legal is taking away their financial excuse. And if your spouse wants one, as long as they contact them within 60 days of you enrolling for this membership, they can have one as well at no additional cost. And your covered family members for only $20 each, already saving you hundreds of dollars right there. Now, the next area of coverage is motor vehicle legal services. This one's effective just 15 days after enrollment. Everything else is right away, so slow down for just a couple of weeks. Now, I've used this area most often, okay, I must admit, but I'm just testing it out for you all, making sure that it's okay. Now, they're going to give you assistance or even representation depending on your state, so make sure you take a look at your kit or brochures to find out your state limitations. But they actually assisted me with representation when I received a moving traffic violation. I never forget it because I had to go to court. And I showed up, and the officer showed up as well because my game plan prior to prepaid legal services was that I hoped that the officer wouldn't show up. I know it'd be thrown out of court. So when I showed up and my lawyer showed up with prepaid legal services, he said to me, I'm going to go speak with the officer. I couldn't believe he's going to go speak with the officer. And so he comes back and says, Mr. Self, I know you said you were in a rush, so I requested that we go first. I couldn't believe it. We were going to go first. When I worked at the mall, I used to stay in court all day long with the speeding ticket because my last name starts with an S and I'd have to wait for them to call my name. But nope, had prepaid legal services, got to go up first. There's about 40 people or so in the courtroom. And as I'm walking up, I can hear folks whispering. They said things like, who's he play for? So, of course, I started dribbling. No, I didn't. But I walked up. I felt special. And when I walked up, we're sworn in. The officer, myself, and the officer gives his testimony. I saw this gentleman heading down this route, this type of vehicle. Sound good to me. But my lawyer in the middle of all that says, objection, Your Honor. And I couldn't believe it because this isn't Matlock. This is traffic court. And so the judge says, please, counsel, hold your remarks until the officer finishes his testimony. So my lawyer didn't say anything else until the end. And he had some book with him. And he said, Your Honor, in the case of such and such versus such and such, some case I don't remember today, he says proper and mandatory. Not only must this officer state that he's licensed to operate the laser gun in that county, but he must also state that that same laser gun has been calibrated and checked under some long code that he mentioned. I looked at my lawyer, I said, you complete me, right? No, I didn't, but I thought about it. And the judge says, counsel, you are correct in stating that. Officer, unfortunately, you failed to mention that. Mr. Self, you're free to leave at this time. No points, no fine, no court costs. It was like I wasn't even there, but that's the power of having access to a lawyer who knows that area of law. Now, look, I have buddies that are lawyers, okay? But not every lawyer knows every area of law, like not every doctor knows every area of medicine. So it just makes sense to have access to law firms who have attorneys or lawyers in them with different experience. And so again, that's what I was able to do. Now, there's additional motor vehicle legal service benefits. So make sure, again, you check out your brochures. I think you'll be excited about some of the additional services, and make sure you check out the limitations as well. The next area of coverage is trial defense. Now, we all know we live in a very litigious society. People assume people for anything nowadays. So if you or your spouse are named in a civil lawsuit or a job-related criminal lawsuit, you have a scheduled number of hours. Starts off at 75 hours of assistance with our expanded family plan. Now, it increases every single year because there's no real contract here. It's a month-by-month service. But the fifth year, you max out at 335 hours. So we increase your benefits every year as a way of saying thank you for keeping our services. Now, I thought that I'd never have to use this because whoever thinks they're going to be named in a lawsuit? But I was. But I'd rather have it and never need it than to need it and not have it. Now, I've not used all my 75 hours, but again, it's my protection in the bank. For an example, if you had a fire in your home, you wouldn't go shopping for a fire extinguisher at that time. It wouldn't make any sense. But people do that. But you don't have to do that with your legal fire. You have a legal extinguisher in the back pocket called prepaid legal services whenever you need that. Okay, now things like bankruptcy, child custody, divorce, those things are covered under our preferred member rate in an area I'll talk about here in a few minutes. The next area of coverage is our IRS audit legal service, the Internal Revenue Service. You know, IRS stands for I'm really scared. And my mother retired from the Internal Revenue Service after 30 plus years of working there. She says, Darnell, I can't tell you how many people bring bags of receipts to an audit, getting themselves in more trouble than they were in when they were named in the audit. So with prepaid legal services, again, you have a set number of hours that the attorney is going to assist you with your audit. So let's make sure that you're taking advantage of this. Now, the coverage begins with the tax return due August 15th of the year that you enrolled. So again, excited to have different areas of coverage. The next area of coverage is our preferred member discount. And you get a discount on anything that falls outside of the normal area of coverage on the benefits that I've already mentioned. And this is exciting because not how much money you make, but how much money you keep. Like if I make $300,000 a year, but I spend $500,000, I'm just broke at a higher level. And here you have a discount for anything that falls outside the normal area of coverage, even on pre-existing matters. Look, I love discounts. I shop at places where I get discounts all the time. So I shop at the places where I get quality products, you know, some of the bulk places. Now you got to buy the big ketchup, you got to squeeze it like this, but you save money. And it's the same thing here. So why wouldn't you want the best for the least amount? Now, maybe a retainer will be required, or if you need representation, court representation, you just need 5 days prior notice, but you're getting a discount on anything that falls outside the normal area of coverage. So use your discount. I know that's a lot of information, so be sure to check out your brochure, your membership kit, so you can see all the limitations, so you can see all the additional services that we didn't go over today on this video. Now, we've added on an additional benefit called the Legal Shield. The Legal Shield gives you access to a lawyer 24 hours a day in emergency situations. Let's say you're being questioned, detained, or arrested. Let's say the authorities come to remove your children, or perhaps you've been in a horrible car accident. Of course, you want to make sure everybody's okay, but you also want to call your prepaid legal lawyer, and you have access to that 24 hours a day. Look, I had a quick story where I had to use the services, and I was coming home from a studio putting a DVD project together. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm pulled over by this officer. And I'm not talking about officers. I have buddies that are officers. It's that less than 1% that make a lot look bad in any industry. So I'm pulled over, and he comes up to my window, and he says, license and registration. I said, sure. May I ask why I'm being pulled over? He said, no, you may not. And so I'm getting out my license and registration. He says, this automobile belonged to you. And I said, yes, sir. So I'm getting out my license and my registration rather out of my glove compartment. And he says, so when I look at that registration, it's going to say your name on it. And I said, yes, sir. And so I get it out. He says, what do your vanity plates mean? Your personalized tags? Because I used to own a car a while ago that said prepaid on the license plate. He said, did you prepay for this vehicle? And by now you probably already know I like the joke and I wanted to say, yeah, cash, but I didn't say that. I said, no, it stands for prepaid legal services. And he says, oh, you're a lawyer. I said, no, sir, I just have access to lawyers all across North America. And I know that sounds good, but it didn't work. He said, you ever been arrested before? I said, no, sir. He said, I need you to step out the vehicle at this time. This is 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I give him my Legal Shield card. And the Legal Shield card said to any security personnel or law enforcement officer, if it's your intention to question, detain, or arrest me, please allow me to call my attorney immediately, which is your right. So my Miranda right's been in place for a long time. But what good is having the right if you can't afford access to it? So he says, what's this? I said, I'm supposed to give it to you at this time. That's all I said. And so I just handed it to him. He walked back to the cruiser. I can't tell you honestly whether he'd read it or not, but he came back a couple of minutes later. He gave me back my information. He said, Mr. Self, have a nice night, sir. And that's the power of having access to a lawyer. Look, I have a teenage driver now. I can't imagine him being out without having access to this Legal Shield card. Now, our service is not set up for bad people to do worse things, but bad things happen to good people too. So be sure to check out your brochure, your membership kit to get any detailed limitations. Now, let's say that you all were my lawyers today, and I came to you and I said, I want you to add up all these things, not at an hourly rate, but let's work out a monthly fee. How much would this be every single month for you to do all these things I just mentioned? You know, lawyers tell me all types of things, thousands or perhaps hundreds of dollars, or maybe more than that if I want their entire law firm. But Prepaid Legal understood the average person could never pay hundreds or thousands of dollars a month. And so we've made it less than $1 a day, $26 a month. I call it a bottled water, a Coke and a smile, and you have access to these services. That's why we're growing so fast, because we have an underserved, an underpenetrated market where everyone needs what we have, but most people don't have it yet. And we have another great service called the Identity Theft Shield. We've connected with a company called Kroll, the leading risk management company in the world. They were called in by Enron for restructuring. They were called in by the Kuwaiti government to seek out Saddam Hussein's financial network. And so they're number one at what they do. And they help us to safeguard individuals from the number one fastest growing crime in America, identity theft. Now, the scary part about identity theft is that most of us don't know when we've been victimized. You could be 9 years old and won't know you've been a victim of identity theft until you're 19 years old. So it's a very scary crime. Now, you want to make sure that you have access to something like this because it's just not financial. Some people think, oh, I have that on my bank card. And that's great. But what about Social Security fraud? Social Security fraud, I did a presentation at the Pentagon. There was a captain who lost his security clearance because his brother-in-law got a job in the captain's name to avoid child support. So again, that's happening. Motor vehicle fraud. Look, there was a computer stolen out of the motor vehicle department, 8,000 to 9,000 identities in that one computer. So now we're being pulled over for a routine traffic violation as a law-abiding citizen, but there's a bench warrant out for our arrest for something we didn't even do. What about medical fraud? That's scary. Someone else used your medical insurance or information, and now you go to the hospital, but you're being infused with the wrong blood. And then there's criminal identity theft. Here's when bad people do bad things in your good name. And sometimes we don't know about it for a while. But with Kroll, one, we give you access to your credit report so you can see what's on there. And there was something on my credit report for $2,000 that wasn't even to me. And I'm thinking, how long would that have gone on without me knowing about it? Most folks don't even check their credit report until they go to buy something or refinance. And they also do monitoring, regular monitoring. So if something pops up in your database, they'll let you know. And this is important, okay? Because you don't want to go years without knowing about this. But most importantly, we do restoration.